back into Apex Acres. Today we're going to talk to you about making spaghetti sauce. Now, I am one who at this time of year, I have so many tomatoes and I'm really pretty much over tomatoes. And it's kind of, what am I going to do with all these? Well, I have like the best spaghetti sauce recipe that you'll ever try. It's super simple. It doesn't take a lot of time. It's very hands-off, and once you're done, it's ready to go. Now, I have a little bit of a secret to tell you. I had to learn along the way and work very hard at being a good cook. And there's still things that I make that don't turn out very well. The first time that I made spaghetti sauce, I was super excited about it. I was following the recipe in the book, and I was gonna make this amazing spaghetti sauce and stir it on the stove and slow cook it all day. And what ended up happening was the bottom of the pot burned out, the sauce was scorched, and it was in the end ruined. So then for a few years, I decided I was not going to make spaghetti sauce. I would just buy it at the store because it was so much hassle and so much work, and it just wasn't something that I was good at or thought that I could be good at. Fast forward a couple years, and I found a recipe online for a roasted cherry tomato spaghetti sauce. And I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. For whatever reason, I clicked on it. And I read the recipe, and instead of cooking it on the stovetop all day, you roast your vegetables, your spaghetti, and your garlic and onion and those things, or your spaghetti. And you roast your tomatoes and onions and things like that in the oven, roast the vegetables, and then you put it in your blender in the end to mix it up. So I'm going to put a link below to the spaghetti sauce recipe, and you can look at it in the future if you like to make this sauce yourself. The sauce is a delicious sauce, but I have kind of come to be one of those that I'm not much of a recipe follower. I kind of use them more as guidelines. Unless it's baking, then of course I follow the rules and follow the recipe. But for this, it's just kind of a guideline. I get my baking temperature from it. I get the method and how to do it. But in the end, the seasonings and how much of each item I put in is based up to the taste of what our family likes. So here we go. Let's get to it. Okay, so first things first, you're going to want to make sure that you have washed your tomatoes. Now, my tomatoes are a mix of kind of saladette size, or maybe slicers you would call them, and cherry tomatoes. I also have a zucchini that I will put in there, which a lot of you are thinking zucchini. Why zucchini? Zucchini thickens your sauce just naturally. You don't have to cook this down in any way. The zucchini is going to thicken it for you so that way you have a nice thick hearty sauce. Also, it adds zucchini and the nutrients into the spaghetti sauce so that if your kids are anything like mine and they see something green, they're not going to touch it. But by mixing this in the blender, nobody's going to know that zucchini is in the sauce. And then we also have Jimmy Nardello peppers. These are a pepper I grew this year, and they have a fantastic flavor. They are delicious when they're roasted. They're actually really good too, just raw. They almost taste to me like a maraschino cherry taste. So they have a wonderfully delicious flavor. But first off, you're going to want to make sure that you wash everything. We use organic gardening practices, so we don't spray any pesticides or anything on our tomatoes, but we still want to wash any dirt or bug or whatever off of the fruit before we get started on making the sauce. Okay, now everything has been washed, and what we're going to do at this point is just do a rough chop on everything. You're going to cut your stem end off of your zucchini. I like cutting it in just chunks. And then I go back through and I quarter them. And everything is just going to go into a big bowl. by doing my zucchinis, peppers, and onions first, because once I get them all cut up, I'm going to drizzle them with olive oil. All right, now that I have the onions and the peppers and the zucchini chopped up, I'm going to drizzle in a little bit of olive oil. And toss them around, just so that they all get nice and coated, and it will, all the vegetables will get that nice caramely brown on the outside while it's roasted in the oven. Next, I'm going to cut up the tomatoes. Now, again, these are tomatoes from my garden. If you get tomatoes at a good price at the grocery store, you absolutely can make them, the recipe with them, but I'm using tomatoes from the garden. Number one, they taste better, and number two, I just have plenty of them and need to use them. So what you want to do is you want to cut the core out, and then for the bigger tomatoes, I just cut them into quarters. Now my cherry tomatoes, which are obviously small, I just throw them in whole. I don't worry about cutting them up at all. But we'll go ahead and cut some more of the bigger tomatoes. Now, if there's a bad spot in there, we've had a lot of pest problems and a lot of cracking. I cut those spots out. Obviously, you don't want to eat that. But if there is a slight bit of cracking, I just don't worry about that. I throw it in. It's really not a bad spot. It's just not pretty. And since we're going to put it in the blender, it really doesn't matter. Here's a Opolka tomato. That's more of like a Roma tomato. This one is kind of questionable, but there's a lot of good tomato underneath. So I'm only going to use half of this guy. A lot of times people think that when their tomato has a bad spot, the whole tomato's bad. And that's just not the case. A lot of things, any vegetable, you can cut around the bad spot a lot of times and use that, use the rest of the vegetable, just throw the bad part out. We also have some colorful tomatoes. This one's called a Michael Pollan. Isn't that a lot of fun, the green and the yellow? It's got some kind of funky spots that I'm going to cut out real quick. Now, by putting tomatoes in that are a different color, your sauce is not going to be a bright red color. But don't worry about that. That's okay. It's just because you've chosen to use tomatoes of different colors. It still tastes the same. The color's just a little off. And honestly, the companies that make tomato sauce use red dye in their tomato sauce anyway to give that tomato color, or to give that sauce color. Again, just cut out the bad part and quarter up the rest. Now that I have all my vegetables cut up, I'm going to get out a baking sheet. And I like using a large baking sheet because usually one container spreads out really nice onto a large baking sheet or cookie sheet, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to drizzle some more olive oil onto my baking sheet. Just a little bit, not a lot. And then take the whole container of tomatoes and dump it onto the sheet. Tomatoes, vegetables, everything. And smooth it around. Now, I think you can see here, like I said, it makes up one nice full baking sheet. I have my oven preheated to 400 degrees and I'm going to put them in the oven for 45 minutes. All right, just sprinkling on a little bit of the garlic salt. Like I said, normally I would do regular salt and then fresh garlic. I just don't have any fresh garlic today. Now we're gonna put this in the oven for 45 minutes, 400 degrees, and we're gonna let this get all nice and roasted and some caramelization on the pan. Now, normally I would have garlic cut up and put in here too, garlic cloves, but I realize I don't have any garlic cloves. So what I'm gonna end up doing is I'm gonna cheat a little bit and use some garlic salt.
All right, that looks better. See the caramelization around the edges here?
On the sauce.
That's what I'm looking
Normally
for.
I would use
All right,
actual...
it's time to take them out and set them on the stove to let everything cool. Now I'm gonna let this baking sheet sit and cool for probably, a good hour. I don't want the sauce to be really hot.
While everything's roasting in the oven,
nice and cool,
I'm gonna walk out to the
when
garden and pick some
putting
fresh
it into the
herbs.
blender,
We're
I don't
gonna
have a
pick
chance to
basil,
burn myself.
thyme,
It also
and
helps
oregano.
things thicken
Let's
up
go.
when you blend them together. This will allow some more water to evaporate as it cools, and it'll make the sauce be even thicker. All right, this is the tomatoes and vegetables after 45 minutes in the oven. I want them to be a little more caramelized than they are, so I'm going to put them in another 10 minutes. I just like to use 2 spoons. I wish you guys had smell-o-vision.
When I scoop this in here,
If you could
just
smell
helps
this.
me make sure I don't
It's
drop anything on the
absolutely-
counter. I do have an issue with being a messy cook. The best thing about this method is that you don't have to peel anything. So there's no cooking the tomato and then peeling the skin off and having to seed it and all that stuff. Putting it into the blender and blending it up takes care of all that. You don't have to worry about any of it.
everything has cooled.
And then you still get the good vitamins,
tomatoes and
minerals that
vegetables.
come
So
from
now
the
we're going to scoop
skin
everything
and
into the blender
seeds.
and get it all blended up. We're also going to add in
That's the last spoonful.
Herbs that we
I'm
have,
also
which is
gonna
the oregano, the basil,
the
and
juices.
the thyme. And I'm also going to
on
add
my
kind of my
pan.
own special ingredient.
And dump it in
I
there.
like to put in beef broth.
As
now,
well.
if you're a
Just so I get
vegetarian,
all the
obviously
last
skip
yummy
this step. But I think it adds like a richness to the sauce that
Now
you
one
don't get
pan
without
makes
it.
about
So
one
let's get
blender
started.
full. So that's kind of how I do this. Is one blender full is a batch for me. So it works out perfectly. Now I'm going to take my basil and just put the full leaves in here. As far as how many basil leaves I put in, honestly, I just kind of go by the look. I've never really kept count because I just go by taste more than anything. And I picked some pretty purple basil. Isn't that pretty? I love the way this looks. I'm going to put some of that in there as well. Just a little bit. Now next we have thyme. And thyme
looks like this. They're little bitty leaves. And to put those in, I just take my hand, go against the direction the leaves are going, oops, and pull down the stem, and it gets them all off of there. And thyme, I'm gonna put, probably 4 thyme stems in there. Maybe a little bit more. I'm going to try to keep the stems out because the stems are woody. Oh, let's put one more in there. Okay. And then the last one I'm going to put in there is oregano. And this is what oregano looks like. And again, you're just going to go backwards down the stem and peel the leaves off the stem. And with this, I'm probably doing 4 fresh sprigs of oregano. Now, again, like I said, do this to taste. If your family doesn't like basil, then don't put basil in it. If your family doesn't like oregano, don't put oregano in it. When I make salsas, we don't like cilantro, so I don't put cilantro in it. Now the last thing I'm gonna do, like I said, is I'm gonna add some beef broth. It's probably about a cup of beef broth, but like I said, I put it in just for the richness of the flavor that it gives the sauce. Next we're gonna put the lid on, and then we're gonna pulse it. After I've pulsed it and I've gotten it all pretty well mixed in, now I'm going to let it blend for about a minute or 2. So now what I'll do with the spaghetti sauce is I will put it in a freezer bag and then put it into the freezer and just keep it there for this summer, or I'm sorry, this winter, when we want to make spaghetti sauce. We just pull it out of the freezer and make it. Now, on the recipe that I was given, or that I found on Pinterest, I found online, it says do not can this recipe. Now that it's all blended, I don't know why it says do not can this recipe, but when somebody puts that specifically on an instruction of a recipe, it's a good idea to follow it. So I do not can this recipe. Isn't that beautiful? Oh my gosh. Okay, so let's try it and see how it tastes. It needs a little bit more salt in it for my flavor. So we're going to put some more salt in it, blend it, and taste it again.